Chapter of Bhagavatam. So we're going to look at chapter 11 now, which is Dwarka's love for Krishna. Welcome back from the weekend. I hope everybody's doing fine. Let me see, am I actually live? I am actually live. All right. So, if you need a little reminder of how the story's going, the war, Mahabharata war, is finally over, and all the loose ends are tied up. The loose ends being the emperor didn't want to become emperor because he felt terrible about the war. So that was taken care of by Yudhishthir's grandfather Bhishma, who convinced Yudhishthir that what he did is something that he had to do and that he should become the emperor. And then the other loose end was all the assassination attempts on the heirs of the emperor's family. That was all finished. That storyline finished. And finally, the true storyline is, Krishna's relationships with all these people, how much love they had for each other. So finally, after months, he stayed around for months after the war is over. It's finally time for him to go home. So then last time we got together, we heard about how the women of the city were talking about Krishna. Then he leaves. Now, we'll start up the new chapter. King Yudhishthir affectionately felt the need to protect Krishna, the demon slayer, so he sent 4 squadrons of soldiers to accompany Krishna's departure. So there's a lot of important information in that. If you think about having a relationship with the Supreme Being, you feel pretty limited, because there's not much you can do for the Supreme Being. Like, even if you have a friend who's really wealthy, there's not much you can get them for Christmas, right? There's not much you could do for them they couldn't do for themselves. So what about if you're talking about God? Like, what are you going to do for God that God couldn't already do for himself or herself? So that is a barrier, actually, to bhakti, or love. And so that gets pushed aside. The perception of God's completeness and perfectness and all that kind of stuff, powerfulness, gets downplayed or pushed aside by the power of love, which is superior. This is called Aishwarya versus Madhurya. In the experience of the Supreme, there's these two forces. One's called Aishwarya and one's called Madhurya. Aishwarya is the sense of awe and majesty and power and wow. And Madhurya is a sense of intimacy and sweetness and honey-like taste. So actually the sweetness and the intimacy is more powerful than the awe and the wow. And it downplays, dampens, and actually modifies and puts an illusion over the awe. Just like we get in illusions now, you get in illusions also when you relate with Krishna. But those illusions are all delightful. Our delusions here are all problematic. So Yudhishthir, he feels the need to protect Krishna, which is the most ludicrous thing in the world, logically speaking or objectively speaking. Nobody needs to protect this person that protects everything. So Krishna is addressed as Madhusudan, the demon slayer, but it's also a double entendre, because Madhusudan also means sweeter than honey. So even though he's the demon slayer, he's sweeter than honey. And so even though you don't have to protect him, you feel like you need to protect him. You feel like you need to take care of him. Even though he has no problem being happy all the time, you feel like you need to make him happy. So since Yudhishthir felt the need out of affection to take care of Krishna, he sent 4 squadrons of soldiers with him. So Krishna's leaving his city, and Yudhishthir's like, I don't want anything bad to happen to you. I'm sending 4 squadrons with you to escort you back to your city. And the king and his family personally followed Krishna for a long time, overwhelmed by it should be emperor, not king, right? The emperor and his family personally followed Krishna for a long time, overwhelmed by the impending separation from the central figure of their lives. So the central figure of their lives is leaving. They don't want that. They walk out of the city with Krishna. They follow him for miles. Finally, Krishna had to affectionately yet firmly persuade them to return and continue towards his beloved home city. So finally, after a while, Krishna was like, guys, you got to go back to your city. I'll come back and see you sometime. And so finally, with very heavy hearts, all of the Pandavas, headed by Yudhishthira, turned around and went back. And Krishna went forward only with his people. Now, you're going to hear about some ancient geography, which I'm sure is very delightfully interesting to everybody. But actually it is interesting to hear the names of all these places, because you're going to hear the Bhagavatam gives the route that Krishna went from Hastinapur to Dwarka, but it does it in the old times. It's not talking about, I don't know, what are some new places in India? What's that one? Anyway, not important. Traveling in the land of the Kurus. So now he's in Kurukshetra, right? In the land of the Kurus. That's where the city was, the capital city was. He passed through the jungle. So first after he leaves Hastinapur, there used to be a jungle around Delhi. And then he goes south along Yamuna. So he left Hastinapur, which is basically Delhi, entered into a jungle which used to surround Delhi, doesn't anymore, and went to Yamuna and followed Yamuna south. Then he went past these different countries. I'll give you translations of the terms, and then I'll give you the terms. He went past 5 lands, God's land, and into Creator's land. So that's Panchala is 5 lands, and God's land is Surasena, and Creator's land is Brahmavarta. Then he crossed the river and headed westward into fisher country, Matsya. So they did have fish in their culture at the time. It's just that common people probably ate it, but the people who were exemplary didn't eat it. And through the dry deserts towards the Saraswati River. So also there were deserts in those days as well. Now the deserts have pretty much taken over northern India. There used to be a jungle around Delhi. Now it's pretty much a desert around Delhi. But the desert used to be at more of a distance. So anyway, so Krishna went out from Hastinapur south along Yamuna, went through all these countries, came into Matsya, and then got to the desert. And so it's a desert. The desert is like, it seems to me I'm not sure how I'm not actually there with this ancient map, but it seems to me like it's this gap between Yamuna and Saraswati where you have to get from one river to the next. Now, why does Krishna go along the river? It's very safe to travel along a river because whenever you need water, you got it. And also you don't get lost. So there's this one kind of perilous area where you have to go without a river across through a dry spot and like a desert spot till you get to the next river, Saraswati. So Krishna took that route, got to Saraswati. When he got to Saraswati, he traveled along it and entered heroic country. Heroic country is Sovira. It's a country that used to be called Sovira. And then there's a city in heroic country called Powerful City, Abhira. After Powerful City, you get Anartha, which is the land of plenty. So there's this little desert in the middle of India in this time 5,000 years ago, and there's jungle central, and there's farmland, kind of rich soil area to the west. That's how it was 5,000 years ago. It was a long journey, and the horses seemed weary at the end. During the trip, whenever evening took the sun to rest in the western ocean, Hari would also stop to rest. So Hari himself is respecting the way nature is, because Hari's manifested nature in order to have a clock against which to do his stuff. So when the sun goes down, he also stops. Now the nice thing about him stopping and resting is people could come and see him. So it says here, whenever Krishna would stop for the night, they would set up tents or whatever, and whoever was local in the vicinity would be like, wow, Krishna's here now. Whether they all thought that he was Vishnu Hari or they just thought here's a super famous king, it's different per different individual. Different individuals have different concepts of Krishna. But he's definitely a huge celebrity, so everybody would come out. Every local person from the villages or homesteads or whatever in the area would come out to Krishna's encampment, give him presents, and just talk to him and see him, meet him. So it was a nice opportunity, actually. What actually wound up happening was a lot of people that didn't live in any one of these places where Krishna is frequently seen got the chance to interact with him. When he finally reached the borders of his prosperous city, Dwarka, so finally gets, now Dwarka we know, it's just to the west. When he finally got there, he sounded his wondrous conch. So warriors and many sorts of people used to carry conch shells that could be blown like horns. In situations where you needed a horn, they had this conch, and it makes a really cool sound. And some of them are really loud. Some of them have amazing properties. So Krishna has a very special conch. All of these different warriors have very unique, special conches, some with magic powers. Now, the thing that it says here is, although this conch was very white, it blushed a brilliant red when it was placed to the great adventurer's lips. Isn't that cool? For some reason, Nan is asking if Krishna was a Capricorn, because Capricorn is very unique. Krishna is the sadhus note Krishna, and actually this book, Bhagavad Purana, describes Krishna as Rohini. So probably that means Taurus, although who knows. But he's Rohini, and that's why he's quite good at expressing emotion. Alright, so when he finally reached the borders, he blew the conch to say, hey, I'm here. And although that conch was very white, it's a Rohini moon and ascendant, because he's born on the half moon at midnight. Although the conch was very white, it blushed a brilliant red when pressed to the redness of the great adventurer's lips. Reverberating in his lotus-like hand, it looked like a swan singing amongst lotuses. Why did it look like a swan singing amongst lotuses? Because it's white. So what are the lotuses? Krishna's mouth and Krishna's hand and Krishna's eyes. So it looked like a swan swimming in lotuses singing. And what does it tell you about Krishna's lips? If you put a white conch next to it, the conch looks red. So with this announcement of his return, Krishna erased the citizens' worries. So everybody was worrying, when is he going to come back? We don't have Facebook, YouTube, and all that stuff. He's off there in the city, miles away across the desert, months longer than he's supposed to be. When's he going to come back? So they finally get this, and they look out and they see dust. They know that Krishna's coming. So they get all of their worries go away. Now Krishna's, all of his family are here. Hearing it, all their fears fled, and they ran quickly towards the sound, greedy to see their beloved protector. When they reach greedy, you see, there's this kind of greed. Greed is natural to the soul. When you want something a lot, you greed for it. It's not a problem to be greedy. It's the concept of the self is the problem. If you have a correct concept of the self, then your greed is quite good. It's healthy. It's like the greed of birds to eat pollen and spread it around. It works with the whole system. When you have an improper conception of the self, then the greed does nasty things, because you have a nasty concept of self. A self which exists at the expense of or independent of others. So it's not really greed or lust or any of these things that are problems. The problem is the lack of correct self-knowledge. So the citizens got greedy to see him, so they ran out. When they reached him, they showered him joyfully with many gifts. So again, like giving gifts to God. But they don't care about that. They don't stop to think about that. The feelings are running the show. When they reach him, they shower him joyfully with many gifts. And if you think like, what? The feelings are running the show? Just think of how a mom feels about her grown-up child. The feelings run the show. You never really feel like, well, he's not my kid anymore. He's always your kid. Once your kid, always your kid. All right, so when they reached him, they showered him joyfully with many gifts, like a candle, offering light to the sun. This is the conception that they had, those who were slightly more aware of what was going on. Like a candle offering light to the sun. Why do you need to give gifts to Krishna? But you do it anyway. You worship the Ganges with Ganges water. You worship the sun with a candle, with a flame. So you give yourself to Krishna because you are the same. You are the same substance that he is. So giving gifts and everything, it's not meaningless. It's real. It is like a light candle offering to the sun. In a sense, it seems ludicrous, but it's not ludicrous at all. The candle is light and flame, therefore it can give light to the sun. Krishna is already self-blissful and incessantly self-fulfilled, the Bhagavatam says, but the gifts were expressions of love. Like when a daughter gives you a drawing and says, "Daddy, this is for you." It's not art. It's not from a museum. It's not like expensive. It's not fancy. The picture, it's like a drawing of you and you look awful. That's not the point. The point, you feel great that your daughter made a picture of you and gave it to you. That's what's going on here. With faces made cheerful by love, they spoke eager and stammering words like children to their ever-caring father. So here's what they said. Maybe we'll cover this today and see how we are on time. They said, "Oh, most worthy master." So now these guys in Dwarka, they're a little bit more in what's called a dasya bhava. In Hastinapur, they're a bit more in a sakhya bhava, which means in Hastinapur, in the city that Krishna just left, they're a bit more in a friendly, informal mood to them because he's not formally a relative. Or he's a distant relative. But here in Dwarka, he's the king, they're the subjects, they're the citizens, so it's a little bit more called Dasya Bhava, where they're a little bit more aware of being subordinate. In Hastinapur, they're more like equals, although Krishna's still like their advisor and everything. So you're going to feel a little bit more, when you hear the Dwarka people talk, you're going to feel a little bit more of the way that a child loves a parent, or the way that a servant loves a protector, something like that. So they start off by saying, "O most worthy master, at last we are back at your lotus-like feet. Brahma, his offspring, and the king of gods worship these feet because they want utmost protection from frightening fate." So anyone who wants to be protected from frightening fate should turn their attention to Vishnu. Even Maheshwar, the king of gods, even Brahma and all the children of Brahma do so. That's what they're saying. So people are, fate is difficult. Fate does things like create pandemics. Fate does things like kill people. So people want some... No, it's not like a thing like accept Jesus in your heart and you be saved. It's a practical thing. The reason why you have fate is because of independent action. Right? On the basis of independent action, which means acting with your own self as the primary beneficiary, then you get independent reaction. It's just simple. Now, if if you're not acting with yourself as the primary beneficiary, but just improve it, like your family is the primary beneficiary, then you don't have this. You're not imposed on by the fate as much. And so ultimately, if you're acting with Vishnu as the beneficiary of your act, then all of the fate energy is going to Vishnu, not you. It's a real simple, practical thing. Nan has a question: is Bhagavatam Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is not. Bhagavad Gita is a chapter in Mahabharata. We explained this earlier, so look in the playlist of all these videos to the spot where we explain what Bhagavatam is. Bhagavad Gita came a little bit. It's same author, Vyasadeva, but it was one try before Bhagavatam. He wrote Bhagavad Gita. So then they continue and they say, you are the creator of everything, but out of affection, you became our own mother, father, and husband. So you are the creator of everything. You don't need any friends. You don't. But because of love, you want friends, you want relatives. That's why we're here. That's what they're saying. You're the creator of everything, but out of affection for us, you become our own mother, father, and husband. You are the eternal guru and topmost divinity. Everything we do for you. You are the central focus of our being. It is very rare even for a god to see you, but we easily glance upon your all-auspicious beauty, and your happy, affectionate, love-laden glance falls upon us. So this is beautiful. First of all, it's a little bit in Dasibhava, which is like subservient mood, but it's everything in relation to Krishna, even when it's in subservience, is like zapped or electrified or electrocuted by sweetness and even like a sense of romance. So you can feel that in here. I'll bring it out in a second. Let me just address this one question. Martin says, doesn't the Shrimad Bhagavatam have a Bhagavad Gita? Generically speaking, but the book called Bhagavad Gita is the one that's from Mahabharata. The one where Krishna talks to Arjuna is Mahabharata. In the 11th part of Bhagavatam, Krishna gives a similar discussion to Uddhava, and it's called Uddhava Gita. Generally, it's known as Uddhava Gita, not Bhagavad Gita. So back to this. We easily glance upon your all auspicious beauty, and your happy, affectionate, love-laden glance falls upon us. There's two things here. And some people who practice Krishna consciousness don't get this. Don't understand this very well, but there's two parts here. There's you having darshan of Krishna, and there's Krishna having darshan of you. So there's these Dwarka residents being able to actually see the beauty of Krishna. That's one thing that causes great happiness. But the other thing that causes, and I'll say it causes even greater happiness, it's not to see Krishna, but to be seen by Krishna is more exciting than seeing him. And in fact, it includes seeing him. So if you put it into Prakriti Purusha terms or male-female terms, the male is the seer and the female is the seen. So it's actually more exciting. The female is drawing the attention of the male. That's the basic masculine-feminine archetype. So the devotee draws the attention of Krishna and experiences that joy of having that attention fall on them. And that includes the experience of seeing Krishna. But from Krishna's point of view, he's just seeing. But he also draws your attention towards him. So it's a play going back and forth. So the reason why I say a lot of people don't get this is a lot of people don't understand the role of self-worth the role of self in bhakti. There's a great deal of self-worth and the importance of self-worth. A lot of people that practice spirituality and bhakti mistakenly think that there's no point, that self-worth is out the window. They have a rudimentary concept of humility, which doesn't understand that the soul needs to feel beautiful. The soul needs to feel needed. The soul needs to feel wanted. It's not just, I'm nothing and you're everything. It's to feel that you, who are everything, are paying attention to me. That's the ecstasy. So what these Dwarka, what they would call Dwarka Vasis, what these residents of Krishna's city are saying right here is, you're the central focus of our being. We can see you easily because you live with us. Even the gods can't really see you. But the real thing is, since you are the central focus of our being, we attract your attention. You get it? That's the real joy. Fuzz wants to know if there's a foreign account of Krishna. If it's a foreign account, I don't know what foreign means. This is Vedas, so foreign to the Veda, I don't understand. You would probably just have some principle manifest in some other cultural setting. But the cultural setting of Krishna is extremely important. Just like I'm Italian, and it's a big part of my personality, and I grew up in New York, it's a big part of my personality. I'm not me without that. So similarly, the things that you might think are Indian, they're not actually Indian, because India doesn't even have most of these things anymore. You'll see. You'll see right in this chapter many things that in India now will be like, no, you can't do that. It's not like it's an Indian revelation of Krishna. This is Krishna. Does this, Martin wants to ask, does the Atma have knowledge of Bhagavatam inherent in it? Maybe you mean Bhagavan, knowledge of God inherent in it. No, the Atma doesn't, because such knowledge is not forgettable. What the Atma is consciousness. Consciousness has the potential for knowledge. It has the potential for experience. But what it experiences is up to it. Okay, we got a few more minutes. No, the soul doesn't have Veda in it. The soul is the stage for Veda, but the Veda is the Veda. People don't maybe like to hear that because you want to think that you're male and you can produce all this stuff and you're God and you're self-sufficient and everything, but actually you're dependent and you need support from outside. You're just a spark of consciousness. We don't have knowledge, but we can experience knowledge and get it. We can bring it in. If you think that the soul has knowledge and the Vedas and everything inherent in it, then you don't really understand what knowledge and the Vedas really are, because they're not things that can be forgotten, put into illusion, covered. I told you what's in the Atma. The Atma is consciousness. Consciousness is the Atma. First of all, there's nothing in the Atma. The Atma is an indivisible particle. But what is the Atma? The Atma is consciousness. What is consciousness? Consciousness is the ability to know. So the consciousness is the substrate for Veda, but isn't Veda itself. Veda is dependent on, or Veda or knowledge is, consciousness is the substrate for knowledge. Knowledge is in relationship, it's not an individual. Knowledge is the knower knowing the known. So the knower itself doesn't have knowledge in it. Fuzz, here's your, what we're doing right now is what you're asking for. Stop thinking that it's cultural or that culture is wrong. This Kunti explained how the formless infinite has a form. So go back and read that. Go back to that live stream. The formless infinite has a finite, definite form because the formless infinite is consciousness. Consciousness wants experience. Experience requires experiencer and experienced. And that's why there's individual entities. And that's why colors, shapes, forms, names, etc. are not inconsequential. And Krishna dresses a certain way because it expresses his personality, not because he was born in India. He sets the tempo for what goes on. He eats a certain kind of food because that's what he wants to eat. And therefore, the stuff that he eats, the way that he dresses, etc., 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 it's not superfluous. If you think that it's superfluous, you actually don't realize that, no, he's actually an individual. Just like I'm saying, you can realize pretty easy that I'm an individual. So you can't really erase aspects of my individuality. Like I went to school at Sachem High School. That's the school I went to school at. And so I had such and such friend and such and such friend, and I ate this kind of food, and I had this kind of family from this kind of background, and that's what makes me who I am. It's the same thing with any individual, including the supreme individual. These things are not divorceable. None wants to know if Krishna is pure vegetarian. Yes, though there's accounts in Harivamsa of there being other non-vegetarian food in his village. The vegetarianism thing is not the same that we have today. Like if COVID actually teaches anybody anything, one thing it teaches is how strange our economic system is these days. And the vegetarianism also has to be a bit strange in response to the kind of agriculture system that it exists in. It has to be a bit more extreme. But in Krishna's world, the animals are right there, and you take care of them. And when they die, what do you do with them? So, what people don't like to eat meat. Most people, the people that are more progressive in their consciousness, don't like to eat it, but other people who need it, they take the dead animal and they utilize it. So it's not like veganism and all that stuff is really relevant in that very highly agricultural, agrarian society that was very organic and natural. But it's not like I'm downplaying it for these days, and I think it's a great thing. But definitely, Krishna himself is vegetarian. We don't have any accounts of to the contrary. Most, if not every ideal figure in Indian history is. All right, back to this. So let's get back to this. Oh my God, we got. Okay, I'm just going to follow up on these questions since why not? And then we'll end up with that. So Martin says, so dhotis, tilak, etc. are reflections of Krishna's life and therefore. So you jump to like some conclusion that dhotis and tilak and all that stuff is what Krishna was wearing. First study the Bhagavatam really carefully with an open mind and see what he's wearing. He doesn't look like a Hare Krishna. It doesn't mean that you have to dress like a Hare Krishna if you want to get into Krishna. Just open, with an open mind, read the Bhagavatam. Bardo asks, so everything that is a context of your current personal incarnation is just a unique type of soil or soul was planted into for the purpose. Right. Everything that's your part of your current identity is... See, our identity is based on how we've been acting in the past and through our past lives. And our identity is facilitated through Prakriti, which is the external energy, or just the external energy of God, which is the energy that reacts to your karma, your independent deeds. And so as a result of that, you're born in these different situations. It expresses the individual that you are. In the same way, the people that are not independently active, but they're active with Bhagavan as the center of their activity, they manifest their individuality in that Prakriti. And the specifics of it are who they are. You can't say this gopi wears this kind of nose ring and that's not important. That's important. That's her identity. You can't say that Krishna's peacock feather isn't important. It's irreplaceable. Every little tiny thing about any individual in this Leela is irreplaceable and undeletable without changing who they are. Everybody wants to feel important, and everybody wants to feel like whatever, like they're already okay. So they want to hear that, well, Krishna could also wear a baseball hat and eat hot dogs and go to Yankees baseball games. But he doesn't. It's just not Krishna. It's somebody else. Some other manifestation of some fraction or fragment of Krishna. Bardo wants to know, can I have karma not to be born? No, you can't have karma not to be born, but you can have no karma. And then you don't get born. Why is human existence so valuable? Because you have a brain which can process words. That's why human existence is so valuable. Because your brain can process words, and the Veda is communicated in words. So you can actually rapidly and... Well, there's another reason also. You can rapidly and significantly advance your comprehension of the universe through word processing, especially if you get good words, and ideally if you get the Vedic words and comprehend those. Another reason why human existence is valuable is because it's fairly short. Because you have the kind of intellectual level that you have, and also these hands, you have a lot of ability to make choice. So in a short amount of time, you can make a lot of choices. So the human, to be born as a human is very valuable for that reason also, because it's like an explosion of new karma can be made, for better or for worse. Because there's a short, intense burst of highly free-willed activity in comparison to other species. If you have no karma and you're not born, then Bardo wants to know, then what happens? Then you're not born. So then you become unmanifest. That's called Sayuja Mukti. But if you have no karma but you have bhakti, then you get pulled into Krishna's prakriti, Krishna's nature, Krishna's world, and you are born there. Any other questions? You guys are hot on questions today. I like it. Give you another minute or two. But if you have a question, it's going to take you some time to type it in, so just type a question mark first or something so I know that you got one. All right, we're going to say that there's no questions. I had a great time today. Glad to be back after the weekend. And, Martin's got a question, so we'll wait for it. But still, this will be the last one. And I'll see you tomorrow after this question. Let's see what Martin's question is. How can Krishna say there's no bondage? Where does Krishna say there's no bondage? Gotta clarify that question, please, Govind. Can I choose not to be with Krishna? Bardo says. Isn't that obvious? Obviously, yes, right? Unless you can send me a selfie of you hanging out with Krishna right now. Martin, how does the spiritual energy exist along with Maya, Shakti, as the disciple develops in Bhakti? How does the spiritual... It doesn't. As a disciple develops, as a sadhaka or a practitioner develops in bhakti, they're clearing out anartha. That's the development. Think of it this way, like, think of your heart as a house, but it's got a wall around it. Your heart is a house, but it's got a wall around it. And then there's a postman trying to deliver a package. They don't both exist together. So just check this out. There's a postman trying to deliver a package into your house. What you have to do is open the door, right? So all the spiritual practice is analogous to opening the door. The problem is if you have like dogs and tons of boxes and garbage in front of your door, then you're going to have a really lot of work to get to the door. And we have piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of junk on the door to our heart. So spiritual, what happens to a practitioner as they develop in bhakti is nashta prayeshva bhadreshu. They get rid of all the blockage that's around the heart. And then when that is done, then bhakti becomes established. They open the door and bhakti comes in. Okay? So it's not like it's coexisting. Then when it comes into the heart, then that's a state called bhava bhakti. It's no longer a practice of bhakti. But bhava becomes a part of your existence, becomes a part of your heart. And technically, that is a state where spiritual and material existence is coexisting for a short time, called jivan mukta. So it's a short time when the soul is ready, like Narada Muni had. Remember when Narada was talking about his previous life? So Narada Muni had this jivan mukti state where this soul is ready. It's just got some karma. Karma is just left over. There's some momentum of previous karma still has to work itself out, and then the soul is gone. Bardo has a big question mark. I'm not sure if that means he's asking a question. How did everything start? It doesn't start. It always exists. Consciousness is the basis for existence. Time is what consciousness perceives. There's no start to consciousness, the perceiver. Things that are perceived stop and start. And then if you say, why or where does consciousness come from? You can't say that because consciousness is the perceiver. If you can imagine something that consciousness doesn't exist, then there's nothing. Neti neti means not that, but it seems words are incompetent. Prashant, you love neti neti. Words are quite competent. Words are the most... People say that words are not sufficient to explain spiritual concepts, but that's not true. However, there's some truth to it that words, like if I say, this is the example usually given. If I see a moon and it's really beautiful and I want you to see the moon, then I can say, wow, look at the moon. And you say, where? I say, it's over there, behind the branches of that tree. The moon is not actually behind the branches of a tree. It's not even anywhere near the tree. But the words can point you. My reference of the tree, etc., can point you to be able to experience the moon. So words are sufficiently useful. They can convey meaning sufficiently if you know how to use them. So you should learn grammar, etc. And you should learn contextual and denotational meanings of words. But if you are not a neophyte with language, then words have sufficient power to point your personal experience in the direction where you can directly intuit the reality of Bhagavan. Whereas without those words, it's extremely, extremely unlikely that you would by chance be able to directly intuit Bhagavan. But it can happen. What are temples like in Japan? They're cool. Fuzz wants to know, unrelated question. They're cool. They're always surrounded by trees. That's what I like about them. Bardo, you once said on your Facebook page that there's no such thing as spiritual life or spiritual world. There's life and world. That's it. Can you clarify that? Thank you. there's no such thing as like, in other words, you see the way reality is manifest right now? Like, you have fingers, arms, eyes, things have eyes, things move, right? That's reality. This is how, what we have right here is the way consciousness manifests. This is the way the spiritual world is also the spiritual world. It's not like it's a different world where there's just like lights flying off and sparkly dazzles and nobody has a body. This is how consciousness manifests itself, the way you look at it when you look at the mirror. The only difference is that we have ignorance as to who and what we are, and we're not. The only difference is that we are currently unaware of the central focus of reality. Diana wants to know if Krishna is a manifestation of love in the yin or yang sense. It's a problem of you thinking of Krishna independent from everything else that comes with Krishna. If you just separate Krishna, then there's no such thing as that person. And then you could say, well, he's pure masculine, blah, blah. But that's not Krishna. He never exists by himself. It's impossible to have a flame without its light. It's impossible to have the sun without the sunshine. You can't get Krishna without everything that surrounds him, and all the people that surround him, and all the land that surrounds him, and all the sounds and smells and tastes that surround him. So Krishna is a complete integration of yin and yang love. But he plays the role as, he himself in that integration plays the part called Vishaya, which I'm not sure how the Chinese words work, but I think Vishaya is yang. And then the rest of the energy around him, you and me, etc., is Ashraya, which probably is what you would refer to as yang. Bardo says neti neti is the only way to get to the bottom of things. Words separate us, two bodies, never one. So you just totally disagree with what I just said, but that's fine. If you think neti neti is the only way to get to the bottom of things, then just do it. And there couldn't be a more ridiculous thing. I'm so glad that Bardo constantly gives me donations too, and I always disagree with him. Thank you, Bardo. But there's nothing stupider than saying that neti neti is the only way to get to the bottom of things. Neti just means subtract, subtract, subtract. So what are you going to arrive at from subtraction? You're going to get a positive number. You're going to get zero. That's why you love Buddhism, because you're going to arrive at zero. Stop with the neti neti junk. Open your ears, open your heart. Hear about Bhagavan. Forget about negating things. But I love you, Bardo. All right, guys. See you tomorrow. Thank you again.